Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining the Livelihood Project. So, today we're going to have a conversation. And if you've been following along, we have our chat segmented. And the conversation is going to be around the change of power and what that means to you. You're at an organization and your leadership, and given how fast the world is moving, given how fast our employment opportunities are shifting, myself, Mike, and Harold really felt that this was a relevant topic to help you maybe reassess skills and or develop new ones to deal with this uncertainty. So Mike, Harold, welcome.
Oh, welcome. Great to be here.
Howdy. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Great to have you. So I know that this is a topic that's, near and dear to all of our hearts. And we were kind of having a warm up, a chat as we were going through some of these things. So I'll just kick it off with you, Mike. You're at an organization and maybe you are working for a leader that you feel really connected to. And I've had this experience, and then things change. How do you accept that change and still ground yourself in your career, the goals of the company? How do you connect that?
I think it's a great question. And first of all, recognize there's a grieving process. You're gonna feel bad for a little bit. You're going to you're gonna feel disoriented. And I heard somebody describe it once as like I stood up too quick and my head was spinning a little bit. So there's all that, and I think the first thing is to, number one, accept it. Number two, learning, building some frameworks and processes around this is important because this will happen again. And so, the first thing is assessment, where are we? And trying to get away from the emotion of it and really take a look at, okay, so what does this do for my work, for my career, including my relationships, but also this for the tasks in front of us as a team. Does this person make us change any of that? And what does that change look like? So the hardest part here is to keep the emotion tapped down and give yourself some time to go, watch way too much Netflix or whatever you need to do to just kind of clear your head. Accept that, okay, I'm a little bit disorienting here, but I'm going to walk through this. I'm going to get better at this, and off you go.
And Harold, when you think about a transition of power, given your experiences, domestic, international, and for a variety of companies, what does that look like? Because it's not always a clear cut. I had someone say to me recently that people start moving differently when there's potentially a transition of power. It feels different.
Yeah, you move differently depending upon what your thought is of the transition. If you're pro-transition, you're pretty bold, you're pretty brave, you're walking down the hallways with a little bit of pep in your step. If you're on the other side of that transition, you may not be seen as much, and you may bring your lunch and you eat in your office because you don't want to upset or draw attention or take away from the momentum. You just kind of want to flow in as things get going. On a more personal level, though, and we're talking, I guess, mid-level, upper-level positions. If you're new, this is going to be an interesting ride. But in the mid-tier director-level positions, this isn't your first time. And you're keeping two different ledgers. You're keeping a ledger of what I'm responsible for and what I am asking my people to do. And then I'm keeping a ledger of, if I could control the world, what would it look like? So in times of transition, I can go to that list and offer something that's some contribution to demonstrate that, here's where we are and here's what we want to do. So
love that. And can I play off that?
Please.
You did something really interesting there, Harold. So coaching is all about when you boil everything away and get down to its raw point is around transition. That is what coaches are trained to help people walk through. And what you described was really important. It was self-coaching. It's like, okay, now that I know, here's what I'm going to do. I'm jazzed and I'm cool and I'm excited if this is good. And that really applies to no matter if this is your first time dealing with it or if it's your X time dealing with it. But the comment about being, recognizing that maybe I need to pull away a little bit is really interesting, because then you start asking the question, how long? And how do you pull away, but without looking like you've pulled away? In other words, we've all known that person that didn't like the new manager coming in, and then they just all of a sudden cut off ties.
Correct.
And it was
Correct.
really messy, and it was really uncomfortable, you know.
But to your point, Mike, the key thing is communication. No
Yes.
matter how disappointing or exciting this transition may be, you still have to maintain some connection to the mothership and to the people around you to understand how this is moving.
Yeah.
If you are just looking at it from a distance, there's no way to understand what's going on. How do you need to respond? How do you pivot, or how do you move forward? So to your point, communication is absolutely critical in this process. And if you fall away too far away out of earshot, you could be in trouble.
Totally agree. And I think that was a really great insight on your part about that.
Oh, thank you, sir. So someone has a new job as of, I guess, the last couple of months.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
How do you assert yourself in a new environment? How does that work?
I try not to, honestly. I find that in my role and roles that I've had, the kind of, first 90 day that everyone preaches and evangelizes really doesn't exist. I think when you're a leader of people, people are looking for you to give direction and to set that barometer. So what I try to do is establish relationships with my immediate team very early, and also establish relationships with my partners. And I ask a lot of questions around what have you seen work in the past? What do you like? Do you find preferable? So that there's this empowerment and buy-in on decision, because no one likes when someone comes to them and says, "This is what we're going to do." I have all the answers. That rarely has been successful in the history of mankind. So I find I try to take a lower key. I've found that in most instances, I'm usually handed like big deliverables and big asks within a very short period of time. And I'll level set with my team and say, look, this is what's on the horizon. And let's really fall in together and make this work. And I think there's a comfort people get in doing the work. Versus we're kind of all going to sit around the conference table and make idle chit chat and, look at each other awkwardly. Because doing the work gives you a chance to partner, and also it lets time elapse, right? You're not new after the 5th day and the 15th day and the 65th day. You're part of the team.
How is that different in an in-person environment versus the Zoom world we're living in? Because the challenge in my head, if I were thinking that I'm in corporate America, is, does it become more task focused? Are you just completing the task, or are you able to actually develop a strategy and to work with the team toward a cohesive plan as a team? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think in the beginning, you're probably a little more task oriented, because you're like, these are the things we have to get done. And then I think as you build your team, as you build trust, confidence, etc., I think you can kind of pull away from the task element and really move into the strategy.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Mike to hit his favorite stanza, and that's about being a consultant and asking a lot of questions.
Yes.
Because as you mature in your career, you begin to ask more questions to understand additional value. And in my days there, it was always over a coffee cup after a meeting when the value is actually delivered. During meetings, you're talking about how you deliver, what timelines, what the objectives are, and these are the tactical things that need to happen. When that meeting is over, then you want to, so how does this fit into this other project? Or how does this, so you want to get an overview. And so that's the part I kind of miss.
And to kind of play that forward, we're kind of moving into the sort of, okay, so what are advice, best practices to do when at whatever level you're at that you do. As we're talking, I remember a client of mine who had a great model, and this just to set the table. This is a very outgoing technology leader, life of the party kind of guy, super connected, a joy to be around. And I was helping him get into a new organization. And I asked him, I said, so what's your plan when you go in? He goes, I don't ask people to do things for a while. I simply listen. And I tell people that for the first few weeks, I'm not going to be directing traffic a lot because I need to learn. And so he said it took away people's tension about whether they would make me happy or whether they felt they could work with me. And he said, I set a tone of listening, which I thought was really good. I don't know how long you could do that. That's the one thing I have, because you're kind of ceding a little bit of control. And I think, Harold, you were raising the point, about around, okay, the dialogue after the meetings, but give yourself, I think the idea is develop some kind of personal onboarding, but also understand at what point do you need to actually be contributing, and what is at least your baseline contribution that you've got to deliver on. Cynthia, you're talking about really some of the tactical stuff. Start to develop that. Okay, this is what I have to do, and as a result of that, I'm going to go there. But I think it raises a really great question, Harold, you were touching on, which is really, as a leader, as a director, how do you should you always be in control, and how do you kind of play with that control level?
I think the challenge I have with that type of opportunity is, as a middle manager, and I'm calling director the Oreo middle there, right? You got the hard crust on either side of a group of people that are looking up to you for direction, feedback, reviews. And then you have people above you who are setting out objectives, goals, tasks. And the director is the middle, as you call them, traffic director, who's trying to get stuff delivered on time, under budget, with quality. So control is not exactly a word that I would use to define it, because this is where things get pressed and long hours and headaches are developed. Instead, being able to facilitate quicker turnover or extensions on projects, a better understanding of what the deliverables are, and to coach, finesse, create enthusiasm in the team of, if we can achieve these goals, hit these timelines, these rewards as a group, as an individual, as a company, we can achieve. So control, I think, is where you go when you really want to get stressed. And that's when you have a lot of mid-tier job hunting, because once you go from staff, manager, director, you think, okay, now I can kind of control things, and you realize, holy crap, I can't. Or, and this is in a corporate environment, I guess in a smaller, faster pace scenario, those demands are given by the customer and your competition. And so while I may be director, and this is a senior position within the organization, if our competitors are growing year over year, increasing competitiveness around specific customers we've targeted, I'm no longer the controller. It's the competitors who are the controllers, and I'm having to drive the team to get to that point where we can be competitive and meet our numbers. So I think the Oreo Center is, although I enjoy it, too much of it can be a little bit of a pain. But that's kind of how I think about it. But both of you have been leaders in various organizations where you've had people reporting up to you. Does that sound reasonable, or what secrets could you share?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Less control and more influence. And I find at this point, early in my leadership journey, I was like, yes. And now I find myself saying, realistically, can we do this? Honestly, given the constraints that are already on the team, given the software limitations of the organization, can we do this? Because I found that in my function, everyone wants you to be able to launch a rocket to the moon, but no one is paying for a NASA level scientist. Right. So what are we going to do here?
How do we get to the space station?
How do we get to the space station? And it's time value of money, right? Cheap, fast, good.
Yeah.
Pick
Well,
one of
You're
pick two of
not
the three.
gonna- right. If you're not going to invest in this heavy infrastructure, fine, then it's going to take longer. And we've got to be realistic in that. And I think it takes leaders saying, we need to be realistic. And I don't think it's realistic to say, oh, that's okay, we'll just all work 10, 15, 20-hour days. I think that's got long-term health repercussions. And this comes back to a previous conversation where there was a time where I thought companies would set that tone for me. And I've realized now, several years in, I have to set that tone and say, no, this is what works for me.
And I think something you said there is really important is, as in your case, and I think out of all of our cases throughout our career, when we came in as the new leader, we also bumped into this thing where the staff might have expectations, but the leadership team says, well, we want to get this done, and you're replacing a person who couldn't do it. How many times did you hear that in your career?
Oh, yeah.
We all heard it. And
Yeah.
the thing is, in some cases, the reason the other person couldn't get it done because it was not doable,
Yep.
given the current constraints. So we're in the, you talk about the Oreo. I think that was a great. I've also heard it described as being the pimple, and with pressure on both sides. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, staff issue, leadership issue, pressure. We know what happens. And yeah, exactly. And so I think one of the arts of this in this sort of transition time is to try to decrease that pressure from both sides. And I think we talked about earlier, more listening. I think there's some reality voice we have to gain. And Cynthia, you talked about the influencer capability. Our best karma and our highest level of influence is actually at the beginning. That everybody says, the honeymoon period. And how do you, I'll kind of throw this back to you guys. What have you done in that first 90 days to set the tone for success day 91? I'm curious.
Well, I can definitely tell you things I've done in the past that have been unsuccessful. I think that one curve that I think everyone falls into, that I can say at this point, don't fall into, don't take the bait, is when your new leader says to you, I want you to drive X, Y, and Z initiative, and I want you to be fierce, and I want you to take a stand. Don't give in to that feeling. Be consistent. Because 20 days from now, when they decide you were too fierce or took too much of a stand, then you're trying to combat that experience while being new in an organization. And I've had leaders say to me, like, you're really vibrant in an interview and you seem kind of low key at work. And it's like, well, that's because I'm trying to do some deep breathing and not stress. And interview chat is different than we're in the mix. But I can honestly say, when leaders say, I want you to really drive, and yes, let's set goals and objectives, but let's also be really mindful of how we're interacting with people, because I've had the reverse.
Something you said there I think is really important is the comment, but let me tell you how I drive. In other words, you're right. We're in the middle of an interview right now. We're having this great conversation and great energy, and you can see my enthusiasm for this. But let me tell you, I drive a little differently. In other words, this is not my. I need to study. I need to connect, and a lot of that will come across maybe a little bit, maybe not distant, but a little quieter. But that's intentional, and almost setting the table for that going in. I think has been, like my client. He set the table, guys. I'm going to be a little quiet for a while. I'm not going to be the outgoing dude you've met. And he is super outgoing. He had to really notch the tone down and notch the expectations down.
Well, and I think too, now that we're all on Zoom and everyone's right here all the time, I had this conversation with someone and I said, the awkward pause is me reading. Like you're looking at me and I'm reading this thing over here. If we were in a conference room, you would actually see me reading the slide. But because we're distant, remote, like I need to process what's being said to me and also what I'm reading, which means I don't really know the expression you're getting right now because I'm really focused on this. Because I think in large part, we've taken our instant expectation and just shifted it onto our workforce.
Absolutely agree.
If we put a filter of DE&I over this discussion,
Hmm.
it gets a little interesting, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Because when we're talking about, the transition of power, if I'm new to the organization and I am that transition, and if I'm a woman or if I'm gay or if I'm African American in a non-majority relationship, so everyone's not like me, is this a little bit more sensitive? Do I feel that I need to communicate more? Do I need to be more sensitive on how things are perceived from activity, outcomes, outputs? Love to get your thoughts on that, especially you, Cynthia, because again, senior position, you're a woman, you're remote. Do you feel that, not like you could compare it to not being a woman, but do you perceive that you are being reviewed more aggressively, or is there any transition at all?
I think the expectation is very high. And I think that what I've been trying to do is help realize and normalize for my leader what that should be.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I appreciate my leader is putting me in front of a lot of people right now and giving me really big deliverables. And I absolutely appreciate it because I've certainly had the reverse in my career. But what I'm saying are things like, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions because this is my first time going through this.
Got it.
And I want to make sure it's flawless because this is the first product people are going to have with me as the leader of this team. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to be that person. 3 months from now, I'm not going to be that person. A year from now, I'll be coming to you with updates about where we are. 2 years from now, I'll just say, hey, it's done. But I think that I don't feel heavily scrutinized being remote. I do think, though, different roles that you take in the organization come with a different, critique
Mhm.
and feeling.
So you're taking ownership of that,
Mhm.
and as a reflection of the work that you do of your product.
Mhm.
So Mike, and your experiences at Hire Club, what advice would you give someone, in that type of environment? What are leadership qualities? What are the essential components of that?
I think you hit on the biggest one, which is communication right up front. And having a very tightly closed loop. There's this interesting communication model of triads.
Mhm.
And, a triad is, okay, it's you and two other people. And let's say that one of them is a staff member, and let's say one of them is your boss, and those two people talk, which they should. So
Mhm.
you can manage two legs of this. But that means you have to be super clear to your leader. You have to be super clear to your staff. And then as you get feedback from that third leg, it's like, okay, how are they doing? What do I need to adjust? What do I need to flag them that, hey, maybe you didn't hear this or this? So that managing triads or managing communication is critical. And I think Cynthia was talking about the other one that's really intriguing, which is deliverables.
Yeah.
How do you put yourself in a position where your first set of deliverables you nail? Not that we talked earlier, not that you hit the moonshot, but you got the rocket launched. You got the thing off the you know
Mhm.
into the atmosphere, and again, setting the expectation through good communication that I'm not going to hit the moon next week, but I am going to get the fuel in the rocket.
And probably the next step around that is the evaluation at the end of it, to
Mhm.
review what was done, the information that was given that was important to the completion, and the information that was given that was not so important or accurate, especially for the people in your department. But in the spirit of leadership from behind, the person you're reporting to needs to kind of understand, here's how I work, here's what I didn't get a chance to hear a lot of, but it would have been helpful. But other than that, we did good, don't you think? And just kind of probe that conversation. I think at least that's been helpful for me.
Oh,
Um,
100%. I think too, like being honest about who you are and how you truly work. Like,
mhm.
I never wanted to admit that I don't do fast math or try to get cute in meetings. And I have colleagues that do. No, I'm like, hang on, let me, yeah, okay, I get the same number. Okay. And saying, I early in my career, I would try to chase all these emails and deliverables and what have you. Now I'm saying things like, we need a project management tool.
Yeah.
Like I can't, and I'm sure, and everyone else says, oh yeah, I feel the same way. And even if they didn't, that's fine too. I know for me, I need to be able to see it in a linear fashion and work against that, because then I can be really impactful.
Right.
Kind of the surprise and what have you, I'm like, all right, this feels a little disconnected. Now, if I have to lead the connection, I can, but we got to start putting it in a space that, because I think that also helps when you think about the triad of communication. Here's what we're looking at, and everyone can go, yes, no, it's all together.
Yep.
Versus the
you don't
part
need to wear a cape.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, and I think what we're really talking about here is frameworks.
Yeah.
You know, what's worked for me before, or if I'm new to this, what have I seen other leaders do? And I'm gonna, you know, to me, plagiarism is a good thing. You know, how can I take a model or process that I saw somebody else do and go, okay, let me play with this here. But the other thing is, how many have either of you felt like I felt, walked in, new leader, and I felt like I had 5 thumbs or 10 thumbs?
Yes.
You know, everything was clumsy.
Yes.
And what I started to recognize was, okay, I don't need to go there. It's not me trying to prove everything. You know, it is that little bit of that imposter syndrome that we've talked off air about. But really, and so I'm not going to try too hard. I'm not, and you know, we've seen the other leaders. Something you said, Cynthia, triggered me on this. Is somebody who's really trying to showboat in a meeting, and they're not showboating because they're good. They're showboating because it makes them feel good or makes them perceive themselves as good. How do you know? We need to look at avoiding that, and just be, you know, some of the best leaders in the world are real meat and potatoes people. I honestly think one of the models of a guy that going into sports that I really appreciate is the Golden State Warriors coach, Steve Kerr.
Oh, he's so great. I love the way he talks to his players.
Right. And you look at, you know, Greg Popovich, you know, to say in basketball, these are guys who they're brilliant people. They're super sharp, but you know what? You never hear them taking any of the praise, glory, or spotlight away from their players. In fact, they're pointing at the players. And I think there's really something about that, about how you gracefully accept that it's not all about you.
Right.
Well, if I can tap on that for just a second, I think that is twofold, that you have to put the spotlight on your players, on your team, and you also have to speak to them in such a way and conduct yourself in such a way that when you do share the spotlight, it's not a shock, right? Like if you ever listen to the way like Steve Kerr talks to his players, right? Like he'll sit beside them, you know, when they're coming off the court, and he'll say, I love what you did over there. Have you thought about ABC? Or I love how brave you are to make that shot. Have you thought about doing this thing over here? And they're very receptive to it, because our brains like the dopamine release of good job, that was great. You know, when you tell someone that, you know, a litany of all the ways that they've been unsuccessful and then go, my team is amazing, it's not going to connect.
Yeah.
It's not going to make that. And people will work for you for a period of time under that strain until they say, I found something else. And you're really on a borrowed time.
Yep.
And that's exemplified in the business world. If this is a startup opportunity, usually you go in teams. And I know the role that I play, and I get the feedback that I need. And there's some things now that we don't have to even talk about because we've done it enough. Versus, and that's why when you're investing, you're looking for good management teams, people who've done it before, ideally people who've done it before together. In corporate environments, the challenge though is, so the director just got promoted to a new position, and then the personal email chat starts begetting, hey, listen, I want to go with. If there's an opening, let me know. I really enjoy working with you. So it's a lot of that stuff that happens in a corporate as well as a smaller environment. So, and it's all about how you interact, how you engage, how you communicate in an effective, aggressive way. And you have to be aggressive with it because some things you just can't take for granted. You just can't assume people understand their value or their contribution to a task. So you have to be very meaningful in that. So yeah, I appreciate that.
And I think kind of, maybe one of the wrap up thoughts here is, solid communication, humility. I'm not the savior here. I'm the person that's going to get this team doing well. I also think there needs to be a recognition that time is short. Duration in roles has shrunk, which means that, it's nationally 4.3 years. In most cities, in most cities, it's quite a bit less. And so how do you, when a transition like that happens, everybody's off, everybody's knocked a little bit off center.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time they're going to look around. And the worst thing you want to have as a new leader is to walk in with an unhappy team or a team that feels off center. So using communication and, building a framework to make them feel safe, to make them feel like, hey, I'm not only here to keep the boat moving forward, but I'm also here to get us doing it faster and better, and to hopefully make this even a better experience for you.
Excellent.
I think those are fantastic closing thoughts, Mike. I think you enumerated, the best possible path.
Yeah. It's going to happen again and again. I'm sorry, I didn't catch on.
No, I was just going to say this was a great conversation we had today. A lot of meat on the bone there.
Yeah.
Great. And for anyone who's watching, you're more than welcome to reach out to the three of us individually on LinkedIn. You can also send us a note at the Livelihood Project 4 at gmail.com. We'd be happy to correspond with you. Feel free to connect on Facebook. We've got all of our vlogs up and also on YouTube. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mike Harold, for another great chat. And we'll be back next week.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.